The Jimi Hendrix experience is over. The acid rock musician died today in a London hospital, apparently from an overdose of drugs. During his short career, Hendrix flailed his electric guitar into some of the most unusual sounds of an unusual music. A report now from ABC's Gregory Jackson.
If you're much over 30, the odds are you never heard of Jimi Hendrix, or only dimly, perhaps a loud voice on the car radio. But take it for fact, in just the past 4 years, Jimi Hendrix became one of the best-known, highest-paid artists in recording history, an astonishing performer whose on-stage gyrations could make Elvis Presley look like a PE teacher. And it may well be that the story of Jimi Hendrix is a small picture of the overall explosive power and wealth of rock. The son of a Seattle gardener, James Marshall Hendrix quit school at 16, but before he was 20, he was touring the country as a backup guitarist for other rock groups. In 1966, a manager discovered him in a Greenwich Village bar, took him to Europe, formed a group, and just 9 months later, Jimi Hendrix returned world famous. At rock festivals, Hendrix was paid $50,000 for a single performance. His album sold in the millions. He should have been a millionaire. It's not known whether he saved his money, but it is known that today, Jimi Hendrix is dead, an overdose. He was 28.
The Jimi Hendrix experience is over.
Now, let's say that you've witnessed a murder and you're told that you'll be next if you open your mouth. You're not likely to open your mouth. So the police come along, they ask you questions, you provide information, but you have to provide false information because you believe that you're the next target.
Excuse me while I kiss this guy. Purple haze. All around.
Hey, what's good, everybody? It's your boy, Seethruthescript here, back with another video. And I know it's been a little minute since I dropped something, but I'm finally back with
Another one.
So sit back and enjoy the ride. On November 27th, 1942, in Seattle, Washington, a man and a woman by the names of James Allen Hendrix and Lucille Jeter gave birth to Johnny Allen Hendrix at Seattle's King County Hospital. And little did they know that they just birthed one of the most revered American guitarists and songwriters of all time, that we would go on to know as Jimi Hendrix. Jimmy's father, who was a talented musician, struggled with alcoholism and was often absent from his son's life, while Jimmy's mother struggled financially and had to rely on family members to help raise Jimmy and his younger brother Leon. As a child, Jimmy was interested in music and would often play a one-string ukulele that he made himself. When he was 15, his father gave him his first acoustic guitar and he began taking lessons from a local musician. Jimmy's playing quickly improved and he started playing gigs at local clubs and bars. Sometime between 1946 and 1950, Jimmy's father James decided to legally change Jimmy's name from Johnny Allen Hendrix to James Marshall Hendrix. The name change was in honor of his deceased brother, Leon Marshall Hendrix. After the name change, Jimmy's father went by the name Al Hendrix, and Jimmy later adopted the name Jimi Hendrix himself. In 1959, Jimmy dropped out of high school and later joined the U.S. Army on May 31st of 1961. He was stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where he was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division. However, his army career was short-lived as he was discharged 13 months later for injuring himself during a parachute jump. When the reports came out, his superiors stated that he would never be a good soldier, which may have been right, but he was damn sure a great musician.
Don't know if I'm coming up or down.
Anyway, after being discharged from the army in 1962, Jimi Hendrix moved to Clarksville, Tennessee, where he played guitar in local clubs and formed a band called the King Casuals. He also briefly worked as a session musician for various R&B acts, including the Isley Brothers and Little Richard. In 1964, Hendrix moved to New York City and began playing in the Greenwich Village music scene. In October of 1965, music industry executive Ed Chaplin signed Jimi Hendrix for a reported $1 up front and a 1% royalty rate on all future earnings. This unfortunately would cause Jimi much financial troubles, along with other problems we'll uncover throughout this rock star's life. However, not too long after being recognized by Ed Chaplin, Jimi caught the attention of former band member of the British rock group The Animals, Chas Chandler, who admired his unique guitar style and stage presence. Chas offered to be Jimi's manager and bring him out to London. So in 1966, Chas helped him to form a new band, the Jimi Hendrix Experience. Chandler was able to use his connections in the music industry to help Hendrix get a recording contract with Track Records, a label that has also helped launch the famous rock band The Who. The label released Jimi's first single, Hey Joe, which became a hit and helped to establish Hendrix's career in the UK. Then in 1967, the Jimi Hendrix Experience released their debut album, Are You Experienced, under Track Records. The album was a critical and commercial success, launching Hendrix's career and establishing him as one of the most innovative and influential guitarists of his time. Some of the singles off that album include Purple Haze, Hey Joe, and Foxy Lady. Riding off the success of the band's first album, they released their second, titled Access, Bold as Love. In 1968, Jimi Hendrix was at the height of his career. He had become a household name and was one of the most celebrated guitarists in the world. The band went on to release their third studio album, Electric Ladyland.
Don't know if I'm coming up or down.
Now, although things were seemingly going well, Jimi was dealing with a bunch of different issues throughout the late 60s. For example, racism was not uncommon, granted he was a black African American in a predominantly white industry. However, Jimi in his earlier years in Seattle went to Garfield High School, which reportedly was a pretty diverse school with kids of all backgrounds attending and connecting on the basis of character opposed to skin. Needless to say, it's not as if he didn't experience any racism. Granted, he did grow up in poverty. However, his time at such a diverse school allowed Jimi to develop a perspective on race that was definitely ahead of his time. He often spoke openly about racism and how much he valued unity, love, and acceptance of all kinds. In the last 2 years of his career, he really reached out to the black community by being more vocal on racial matters and even growing out his afro. But Jimi also had some legal disputes that slowed down his ability to release music due to his crippling deal with music exec Ed Chaplin in 1965. Now you factor his legal troubles with the pressures of fame, and Jimi began to really rely on drugs to cope with his struggles. But please don't get it twisted, Jimi was far from an addict. As most are aware, the 60s was an experimental time, especially when it came to the usage of psychedelic drugs, and Hendrix really managed to carve himself a lane in the psychedelic era of rock music. But on top of those other struggles, Jimi was also having creative differences with his bandmates Noel Redding and Mitch Mitchell, and in June of 1969, the Jimi Hendrix Experience had officially broken up, and Jimi went on to perform with two black musicians by the names of Billy Cox and Buddy Miles. During the last 2 years of Jimi's career, while Chas and Michael were co-managing Jimi, Chaz decided to step away and Michael Jeffrey took over full time, but their relationship was quickly strained when Jeffrey was accused of mishandling Hendrix's finances and making business decisions without Hendrix's knowledge or consent. There was even evidence that Jeffrey embezzled money from Jimi's shows and put it in offshore bank accounts. Some rumors even floated around that Jimi and Michael had an argument on the day before Jimi passed, in which Jimi was threatening to fire Michael as his manager, but there isn't much evidence to support this. But despite all the struggles and stress that comes with the fame, Jimi still had the passion to write, record, and perform. In August of 1969, Jimi Hendrix put on an iconic performance with his band at the Woodstock Festival in New York, which till this day people still reference. Now, earlier in 1969, around February, after one of Jimi's performances, he met Monika Dunneman, a German figure skater, painter, and musician, and daughter of a wealthy German industrialist. They ended up having a romantic relationship that would continue up until Jimi's final days.
Don't know if I'm coming up or down, down.
It's worth mentioning, Jimi did have a prior relationship that he developed in his early days in London with British model Kathy Etchingham, which lasted up until 1969. She was known to frequent his shows and tours during their time together, and some even credit her with helping Hendrix establish himself in the UK music scene. Throughout the last 9 months of Jimi's life, there was a lot that went down, with loads of performances both in the US and UK, as well as some traveling with his girlfriend Monika. Jimi's last major concert was on September 6th of 1970 in Germany at the
Isle of Fehmarn festival.
However, Jimi really loved performing, and although that was his last major concert, he still had his final on-stage performance on September 16th of 1970 when he showed up unannounced at the London jazz club Ronnie Scott's alongside his friend Eric Burdon and the band War. But unfortunately, just 2 days later, on September 18th, the world-renowned guitarist and singer/songwriter Jimi Hendrix was pronounced dead.
Don't know if I'm coming up or down, down.
Now, I can't possibly cover every detail, but there is a solid documentary which I will link in the description below for those interested. Jimi spent the day with his girlfriend Monika Dunneman at the SUMERIAN Hotel. Monika lived at 22 Lansdowne Crescent in the neighborhood of Notting Hill. The couple spent the afternoon drinking tea and taking pictures. These are actually the last pictures of Jimi seen alive. As you can see in some of those photos, he is seen carrying a black and white guitar, which he loved dearly and even named Black Beauty. According to Monika's testimony, the couple spent the day shopping around and even went to a party, coming home at around 1 a.m., which would have been on September 18th. However, the story went a little more like this. At some point, September 17th, Jimi was running some errands at Kensington Market along with Monika, and Jimi decided to drive back to his Cumberland hotel suite, and along the way, Jimi was approached at the light by two pretty women, whom invited Jimi back to their place for dinner and whatnot. Jimi agreed and showed up later that evening with Monika. Now, Jimi was getting the star treatment by these two women, and as expected, this made Monika jealous and uncomfortable for obvious reasons. She ended up storming out of the apartment, and Jimi followed along to apologize. However, Jimi still had a party to attend that night that he didn't intend on bringing Monika to. It's about 1 p.m. September 18th, and Jimi's enjoying himself among the others when Monika showed up banging at the door, begging to see Jimi, and this left Jimi feeling embarrassed, so he asked others at the party to try and get her to leave. Eventually, Monika managed to convince Jimi to leave at around 3 a.m. In the documentary titled Jimi Hendrix: The Last 24 Hours, they state that some believe when Jimi and Monika were leaving the party that Jimi wanted to go back to his Cumberland suite, but went to Monika's because his guitar, Black Beauty, was at her apartment. The documentary goes on to explain how British journalist Keith Altham, the man who conducted Jimi's last ever interview on September 11th of 1970, was the one who invited Jimi to that very party he attended on the night of September 17th. Keith even noted that Jimi seemed quite depressed at the event. Come to find out, music exec Ed Chaplin, the same man who first signed Jimi to that horrible deal, was flying into London that night expecting to meet Jimi. Jimi was supposed to attend a meeting with Polydor and Track Records representatives, as it seems Ed was still trying to squeeze whatever he could out of Jimi, so Jimi ditched the meeting for the party. According to Monica's testimony, when the couple got back to their place, they talked, had some wine, ate, and washed up. Monica apparently took a sleeping tablet around 7 a.m. She then woke up around 10:20 a.m. with Jimi still breathing seemingly fine, and went to the local store to grab some cigarettes, and when she returned, his pulse still seemed normal, but she struggled getting him to wake up. She began to panic and called for emergency services for assistance. While waiting, she noticed 9 of her sleeping pills missing, and roughly around 11:30 a.m. the paramedics showed up, reassuring Monica Jimi would be okay. After transporting Jimi to St. Mary Abbott's hospital, they attempted to save his life, but to no avail. Jimi was pronounced dead at 12:45 p.m. as a result of inhalation of vomit due to barbiturate intoxication, but apparently there was still insufficient evidence of the circumstances, leaving the verdict open surrounding the exact details of Jimi's death. However, that story did not match the paramedics' story, as they stated he was lying there unconscious, covered in vomit, and that no one was in the flat that came with them when transporting Jimi to the hospital. When he was in the hospital, the doctor noticed, along with vomit, a massive amount of red wine in his system. Now, how the red wine got in his system is where the theories go on for a while, and with pretty much all of the key individuals dead, it leaves us with many mysteries.
Don't know if I'm coming up or down.
Many rumors floated around and still do till this day surrounding the exact details, but here are 3 of the top conspiracies still widely discussed. Number 1, murder by overdose. Some people believe that Jimi's manager Michael Jeffrey had a hand in his death. A roadie for Jimi named James Tappy Wright stated in his book, Rock Roadie, that Michael drunkenly admitted to hiring thugs to force wine and barbiturates down his throat, all in an effort to cash out on a $2 million life insurance policy on Mr. Hendrix himself. It's been said that Michael's contract was running out and Jimi couldn't wait to get rid of him due to the fraudulent and cruel management of his career. So Michael, in effort with the mafia, which Michael reportedly had ties to, had Jimi murdered. However, a little less than 3 years after Jimi's suspicious death, Michael died in a strange aircraft accident on March 5th, 1973, so we'll never get to hear his side of the story either. Even the Band of Gypsies drummer insisted he'd seen Jeffrey slip Hendrix 2 bad tabs of acid, which led to Hendrix collapsing on stage at their premiere Madison Square Garden gig in January of 1970. The drummer, Buddy Miles, declared, quote, "One of the biggest reasons why Jimi is dead is because of that guy." Or how about number 2? Assassination by the US government. There is a theory that the US government was behind Jimi's death because he was seen as a political threat due to his support of the Black Panthers and opposition to the Vietnam War. It was stated in the documentary referenced earlier that Jimi Hendrix was monitored by the COINTEL program, which was a counterintelligence program conducted by the FBI from 1956 to 1971 to surveil and disrupt political organizations and individuals considered to be subversive. Essentially, black men with influence and the ability to unify others was a threat and needed to be neutralized. And then there's number 3, suicide. Some people believe that Jimi was depressed as well as frustrated with the music industry and took his own life by intentionally overdosing on drugs, although the evidence they found does not strongly support this theory. On top of this, the stories Monica Dunneman held were lost forever when she passed away on April 5th of 1996 due to carbon monoxide poisoning. Although some are really confident with their conclusions on Jimi's death, the topic never fails to spark an interesting discussion. Now, with all of that out of the way, it's time to break this story down by the numbers using the practice of English gematria, which derives from Kabbalah, aka Jewish mysticism, and is essentially the practice of tying a numerical value to each letter of the alphabet and applying it into a 4-base cipher system. These ciphers work in conjunction with each other to help display patterns to give greater hints to a narrative. These numbers also get analyzed in connection with the date numerology, which allows us as decoders to paint a bigger picture and give a little more insight as to why events happen on a certain date. With that said, the first connection I want to share points out the date numerology of Jimi's death being 97 and 25, like the word death. Notice his full name, James Marshall Hendrix, matches with London, his place of death. In this section, I'd like to briefly touch on the infamous 27 Club, which refers to a group of young artists who have died in mysterious ways at the age of 27. Now, some might just chalk it up as to a bunch of coincidences. However, using the practice of gematria, you get to see how the word ritual in the full reduction cipher holds the value of 27. The number 27, when written out in words, also holds the value of 46 in the full reduction cipher. Now, this also matches with the word sacrifice in the same cipher, so it makes one think, are these people that get inducted into the 27 Club being a sacrifice for some other more deeper spiritual purpose? When examining Jimi's life and death, there are several coincidences involving the number 27 that are worth noting. For example, when you break down the birth numerology of rock star Jimi Hendrix, you see it equates to 27. Jimi was also born on the 27th of November and died at the age of 27 on a date with 27 numerology. Notice the name 27 Club matches in 2 out of the 4 base ciphers with the word death, which is quite fitting. Something I also noticed was from Jimi's death to what would have been his 28th birthday is a span of 2 months and 10 days, like the number 210. The name 27 Club with the number actually spelt out in words holds the value of 210 in the ordinal cipher. 27 Club spelt out also equals 57, along with the words rockstar and entertainer, 2 things we know for sure Jimi Hendrix was. But what's also interesting is that roughly 2 weeks before Jimi's death, he rented out the room 507 at Cumberland Hotel before his death, which was about 3 or 4 miles from the Samarkand Hotel where his body was found. Jimi's girlfriend Monica died due to carbon monoxide poisoning on April 5th, 1996, which leaves 270 days in the year, like the number 27 using the rules of numerology. Notice Monica's name equals 27 in the reduction cipher. Now, moving away from the 27 connections, notice Jimi's full name holds the value of 119, like the word guitarist, which is what the world primarily knows him for. Here you can see the hospital Jimi died at has the same numerical value as his stage name. Another interesting connection surrounding his name is that the first label Jimi signed to, PPX Enterprises, matches with Jimi Hendrix in the reverse ordinal. Now, this is just an observation, as we will likely never know the truth since Monica is dead, but from her 25th to Jimi's death was a span of 86 days, which is code for human and blood sacrifice. And again, her story did have a lot of holes in it despite being accepted by the courts. Also, if you observe the same time span in weeks and days, it's a span of 12 weeks and 3 days, like the number 123, just like the value of Jimi Hendrix in the ordinal cipher. Now, the coroners in the hospital identify large quantities of red wine in the Rockstar system. Notice both red wine and Rockstar equal 666 in the reverse Sumerian cipher, which is the cipher that increases in increments of 6s and then run in reverse for those that are new here. Also, another example of how gematria allows you to spot the strange numerical patterns that match the narrative, both the hospital Jimi died in and the place where his body was found matched with his stage name, as you can see on the screen here. What's also interesting is in the documentary about the last 24 hours of Jimi Hendrix, near the end, a guy mentions how Monica was planning on speaking with the media about the truth of what happened to Hendrix, but she died of a suicide days or weeks before, and you could see how the date numerology that she did die holds the value of 34, just like the word suicide. Ultimately, Jimi Hendrix was a legendary rock musician who revolutionized the sound of the electric guitar and inspired generations of musicians with his innovative playing style as well as his counterculture personality. Despite his short career, he left a huge mark on music and popular culture. His music continues to influence and inspire musicians till this day. His tragic death at the age of 27 cut his career short and left his fans mourning the loss of the true musical genius. However, his legacy and impact on music remains as strong as ever, and his music will continue to be celebrated for generations to come. So if you've made it this far in the video, I truly appreciate you, but y'all know the drill. If you learned or enjoyed anything about this video, please be sure to drop me a comment, beat the hell out of that like button, share the video, and most importantly, subscribe, man. Remember, all of those things are free to do. It's been your boy Script, and I'm out of here.